bullying,
the Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie. Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool, not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men.
and small.
I am strong.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Dan, thank you very much for having me. My sincere gratitude towards you for the opportunity to speak. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'm hoping that I can share a very simple brand story with you, and it'll originate from that ad that all of you just had a chance to see. And hopefully through this very small, one humble example, I'm hoping that we can showcase the difference between classical brand building for the future and what many folks are calling woke advertising. And I'm also hoping that I can draw light on how brand building will appear in the world today, going forward. And I'm hopeful that getting the preamble of that ad gave you a little bit of flavor of what's to come. If you go forward, Sarah. So I'm going to start on January 13th, 2019, around 10 p.m. So this is about a little more than 2 years ago, where we uploaded that film that you just saw onto YouTube. 30 years after we had launched the original campaign for Gillette, which was called The Best a Man Can Get. And what we'd done, of course, as you saw, we took the iconic line, the best a man can get, we sort of turned it on its head. And you ended up seeing this ad that you just saw. Within 1 hour, the ad had gone viral. Within 3 hours, it was the most dominant conversation on Reddit. Within 5 hours, I had received over 40 missed calls. Within 10 hours, I had received my first death threat. Within 12 hours, hashtag Fire Pankaj Bhalla was a legitimate Twitter hashtag with growing traffic, and it wasn't initiated by my wife. Within 24 hours, my home address was made public, and an invitation was sent to shoot me on site. Within 2 days, we had begun to outtrend Brexit, Mueller, Trump, and the last one we're particularly proud of, all the Kardashians combined, an impossible feat. Within a week, we had been watched 110 million times. Within 10 days, we'd reached 15 billion impressions. Within 3 months, we'd seen our strongest increase amongst equity amongst young men. And within 1 year, we actually saw Gillette's equity get stronger across all representative audiences. We had ended up creating the most liked ad on YouTube. But it is also the most disliked ad, I think, ever on YouTube. We'd sparked a conversation around masculinity and the role of men in society. And in the process, we'd also sparked many questions about whether brands should be talking about their purpose instead of just selling their product like they're supposed to. How did all of this happen? What was going on when all of this was happening? Was any of it worth it? What does it feel to step in the fray of today's heated, often divided world? In 2019, this was an event. Now I understand in 2021, it's a Tuesday. But we're still uncomfortable. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning. Prior to running P&G's grooming business in Europe, which is what I do for a living now, I had the great privilege and the great fortune of running Gillette in the US. And I absolutely love Gillette in a way that's not rational and logical or inspiring. I always have. Growing up in low middle class India, I aspired to use Gillette product to have as my first shave. The best a man can get, those words really meant more than a selling line to me. And it was a promise. And as to a young 14-year-old, it was a very attractive one. This promise, the best a man can get, was actually first shown to the world in 1989 at the Super Bowl. I actively encourage you to Google that ad and watch it when you get a moment. The ad has Wall Street bankers and astronauts side by side. I mean, it's like someone took all of the 1980s and squeezed them into one ad. But it worked for Gillette. It really did. The market was ripe for that definition of masculinity. A young kid out of college gets the job he wants, gets the car he wants, and as we realize, towards the end of the ad, gets the girl he wants. And men wanted to be the Gillette man. They bought Gillette, sales boomed, share grew, a friendship was formed. That clean-shaven look became classical for the 90s. And for years, I had often told my teams that brands must stand for more than just their functional benefit, that each brand must use its voice to do good as it does business. And those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. This is not philanthropy, it's a business strategy which allows consumers to connect with brands more deeply and drives positive social impact simultaneously. Gillette needs to do this too. So on its 30th anniversary, which happened to be 2019, we were asking ourselves what men understand by the words, the best a man can get. And we did research for almost a year. We spent time with men in their homes, in their bathrooms, yes, in their bathrooms, watching them shave, asking them questions, and also asking them about masculinity, about being a man in the world today, the divided world today. And the insight we gathered was that there was no real definition of the best man. Most men believed not doing something bad was good enough. It became very, very clear that there was some passiveness in their bestness. Look, Gillette is the largest advertiser for male products in the world. We regularly speak to about 1 billion men. 1 billion men. With great marketing comes great responsibility. With greater marketing budget comes greater responsibility. Gillette has played a role in shaping the perceptions of masculinity for generations. From the debut of this iconic ad that I referenced in 1989, we helped create the view of what it means to be the ideal man. And our research now, in 2019, was telling us that the idea of this alpha male, the leader, the Wall Street banker, the guy who drives the best car, the person who is irresistible to women, the winner, that had no negatives, had to change. Clearly, we picked up that masculinity without textures wasn't masculinity at all. So we knew we had to make way for a more progressive portrayal of the modern man. And this modern man was clearly not passive. He's somebody who steps in to help, to coach, to stop bullying, to be an ally for equality. We conducted this massive research on bullying, both cyberbullying and offline bullying, and we learned that bullying triggers are not the person who bullies, or the person who get bullies, but the audience, the crowd, the people that don't step in. So the new role men had to do was to step in. And the only way to ask for that change to happen is to remind men about why they need to step in. It wasn't to impress, but to role model. Then the next question became, to role model for whom? To role model to get the girl or the guy? It became very clear when we were speaking to men who were parents in particular. The only real reason to role model for men that everyone agreed with was for their children. So after 11 months of work, we made this film and ended it on the frame that said, the next generation of men is watching, what are you doing? Now look, the film is far from perfect and this audience is filled with great creative people. I'm sure they will point out many mistakes that they would have done better. I agree with you. But the message of the ad was simple. Be good, do good. You see something wrong, step in and help. And if you do not do it for yourself, then do it for the next generation, do it for your kids, do it for the people who are watching you. Because they are watching you. Your children are constantly watching you. Not just watching you shave and watching you get ready for work, even if it's for work at home, but they're watching every single thing you do, and what you tell them is significantly less important than what you do, because that's what they'll really remember. So before putting the film online, we wrote a letter on our website. That letter is live today on Gillette.com. We said we too need to be better. Gillette as a brand needs to be better. And we would expunge any example in the past, and we have a 100-year history in the past where we've objectified women. We would try to be good too. We would try to step in too. I authorized $1 million budget every year for 3 years to any not-for-profit organization, that's valid still today, by the way, any not-for-profit organization committed to the cause of progressive masculinity, anti-bullying or anti-harassment. We've given away millions already through something we call the Best Men Can Be Fund. We did all of this before the film went on air. The film that was shaped by the insights I just referenced to you. Having done that, we launched it. And that brings me back to January 13th, right where we started. A long, tough night with a lot of hate. By 6 a.m., we were in the office, and we had learned that in the situation room that we were huddled in, that we may have pissed off a lot of people. We were constantly asking ourselves, have we pulled off a turkey? We all decided to take a break, watch the ad individually one more time. What is it that was making people angry? Quietly, I decided to go take a walk. The hate on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, and even WhatsApp was blowing up. I mean, it was only 7 in the morning, and we were already talking thousands of people upset about our ad. We're market leaders. Millions of people buy our products. Had we made all of them angry? My mind was so clouded that in the absence of an ability to really make a clear decision, I called the wisest person I knew, my significant other. I called her up and I said, is this a good ad? You've seen it. Should we take this ad off air and offline? And my partner simply asked, okay, before you do that, imagine a future where your current 7-year-old son is now 18. He sees this ad on the internet by chance, or whatever the internet has become by then. What do you think he's going to tell his father? Will he be proud, embarrassed, angry? I got a sense of what their answer might be, having just seen the ad again quietly to myself. So I rushed back to the situation room. We kept the ad online. We'd only spent $110,000, and it was very clear we wouldn't have to spend anything more. We did not switch off the comments. We did not reject the trolls. We didn't try to censor anyone's input. We simply stayed calm. Then, late at night, that first night, we were connected by a leading online research agency in the US. They had been trying to reach us since about 5 p.m. that day. So it's been 4 or 5 hours. And they had been sensing the ad online amongst men and women of all ages through the day. Their report was telling us something surprising and counterintuitive. It was saying that the reaction is largely positive. In fact, amongst younger viewers, it's overwhelmingly positive. From that moment onwards, the backlash against the backlash began. And it gained even more momentum. Unprompted, celebrities, sports personalities, and social commentators chimed in. Chrissy Teigen tweeted, CNN covered Gillette on primetime for 60 minutes favorably, followed by NBC, ABC, majority of media platforms, many of whom are in the summit, gave coverage to this ad. The TV commercial was now a part of cultural conversations. Let's be honest. When was the last time you talked about a razor ad? Never. And yet, for many nights that week, and many nights since, this ad got talked. Not only that, but across many universities, this ad got shown. It was presented as not anti-male, but pro-humanity, and it's now across more than 30 universities in America, more than 20 across the world. It is actually a part of gender studies curriculum. Mediocre ad, production value-wise, but again, with a simple message. I know everyone did not like this ad, and there are people who are watching me say this, and I know some of you may not have liked this ad. I didn't think everyone would, and I respect that. To those that have liked the ad, they feel a little more in love with Gillette. Americans have never debated about a razor ad. In January 2019, they did, and many of them, in fact, as we learned subsequently, an overwhelming majority, fell a little bit more in love with Gillette, a brand that they didn't feel anything towards. That one ad gave us the confidence to reestablish our purpose of grooming, which is to groom the next generation of men, because they're watching. Many brilliant, award-winning, business-building ads have followed since. Gillette suddenly has the confidence to take on the 2020s despite the chaos it may bring. And personally, I've learned a lesson from all this curriculum too, that I've had a chance to either teach or participate or hear. I've learned that when my son does see this ad accidentally a few years down the line, I think he's most likely to say, "Dad, you're a very awkward marketer. You're a good man." To all the fathers and mothers watching me now, I know you will agree with me that when your children say that, it's worth it. This is our story. Converting the best a man can get to the best men can be. But also a personal story of an awkward marketer trying to be a slightly better father. And the reason to do both is the same, because the next generation is watching and they're paying close attention to what you're doing, the good, the bad, the ugly. And that's as good an opportunity as I need to do some good. Gillette's act of goodness has triggered many others across the world. It's changed the way we innovate. It's changed the way we speak to men. It's changed our business results and our equity. And it's truly, truly changed the men and women that shape it. That is the story to give to you in this limited time I have. That's the only story worth telling of goodness. Thank you.
If someone asks you what you're made of, don't just tell them, show them. Show them that you're made of proving the doubters wrong. All the doubters, every single one of them. Show them, whatever happens, you don't have to raise your fists to beat your enemies. Show them you're stronger when you stand together. And you never leave anyone out on their own. Show them that where you're from is as important as where you end up.
Raheem Sterling has called for players and fans to unite against discrimination and abuse that's overshadowing football, demanding action.
And show them, whatever our rivalries, whatever our differences, we stand shoulder to shoulder against all forms of prejudice. So it's got no place to grow. Because when we show our best side, we don't just play the game, we change it.
Hey, Davina, thank you for having me.
Hi, thanks for joining. I got really teared up on that first spot, so thank you for that. So this is really great and timely, right? 2019 was with all the current events going on and everything. I'm just curious, as brand purpose is so important these days. Consumers care about it, right? It matters to a consumer what the brand stands for. How, given all the controversy that you received after it aired, and the hate mail and the divisiveness, how did you get your management on board? How did you partner with your agencies to come up with the concept? And well, I understand all of the insights that fed to it, but how did you get everybody on board and figure out the right approach? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Davina. I think probably the biggest conscious thinking in our mind was a deep-rooted belief, both within Gillette and within Procter & Gamble, which is the parent company of Gillette, that it's completely possible to do business and do good. We'd done, for a brand of ours called Always, which is known as Whisper in some parts of the world, we'd just done Like a Girl. And we'd told people that being like a girl wasn't a bad thing, it could be a great thing. We'd started to, even within the company, get a sense that doing good and doing business doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Many of our competitors in the consumer product space were also teaching us this. And so I think that the only requirement that my leaders had of me was that all of this good that you want to do, even if it courts controversy, has to achieve two things: meaningful business results and make people fall a little bit more in love with Gillette than they do now, especially young men. Our business thrives because the next generation of men that are boys today shave or use Gillette products. Otherwise, there's no business to be had 20 years from now. And so it was really designed to do those two things. And when there was enough pre-market qualification done to prove that those two things would eventually happen, if we were patient and calm, and the leadership of the company was very supportive of that. With the agency partners, it was a different story because they were with me all the way. They helped make this. They helped shape this. The Gray Network, which are our partners on Gillette, they were with me the whole 1 year leading up to it. And it was a multifunctional group of planners and creatives that were visiting men's homes. So they were with me when we were speaking to them, and they were helping shape the narrative. The words "the next generation is watching" that came from one of our creatives, and said that's the reason to do it. That the reason to be better is not because you want to be better, because that's not compelling. It's because your children will copy what you do and you want them to be better. And I think everybody agreed that we want our children to be better. I mean, there was no dispute on that at all. So I think it was partnership with Gray through the journey, and then support from the company. And when the business results came and the equity strengthened and market share followed, I think it was much easier to sustain the narrative. And since then, we've gone from strength to strength.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, I think I'd love to hear, I know when we were talking about, this is really an evolution of a tagline that was created back in 1989. And the brand and the consumer has evolved. You talked about grooming and the definition of grooming. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like it aligns with kind of the evolution of your tagline as well.
Yeah, I think there was a very important choice that was done by BBDO New York. BBDO New York gets the credit for writing the original line in 1989, "The best a man can get." They wrote that line. And I'm so glad that they used those words, because they could have said the best razor a man can get, the best shave a man can get, the best grooming a man can get. But they didn't do that. They said the best a man can get. That was a real choice right there waiting for you to take it. And they didn't take it. And I think that's because they understood an overwhelming insight which comes to grooming, which is you do it for confidence, because confidence allows you to be and feel and look better. So when you be and look and feel your best, that's the ultimate narrative for you as a person. That's why you're grooming. And grooming is just a means. You do it in the morning or you do it in the evening, depending upon where you live and who you are, but you just do it as a means. And I think one of the things I've championed, and one of the things many of my colleagues have championed, is that we should not restrict the world of Gillette to looking a certain way or being a certain person. We should say it's the best a man can get, and the best definition of masculinity possible. And so whatever you need to groom to look confident, my friend, whatever it takes, that's fine. And if that's a beard, that's fine too. I have enough stuff to sell you on a beard too, by the way, if you're interested. So the promise of grooming, underlying promise of grooming, is always the same. It never changes, no matter how polarized society becomes. It's always about confidence. And as long as that is true, there's a grooming business to be had. You just have to adjust to the new definition of grooming, which today is not a clean-shaven look only. It's the look I like for my best expression. As long as we stay true to that, we're better off.
Very cool. Now, and this was a global campaign, right? I mean, was this, yeah. So I find it really interesting and you have a lot of people today watching that are based in the US, right? Some with global roles and some with not. But the fact that this message resonated globally, can you talk a little bit about that too? Because I think
it's really funny. We uploaded it in Boston, Massachusetts. It's built for the US audience, built for the US market, January 2019, uploaded on January 13th. January 14th in the afternoon, I get a call from France. A couple of hours later from Australia. I mean, we've come to realize that there is no such thing as a local campaign when the media of choice is digital. This is going to go everywhere and be seen with everyone. If it has merit, either for controversy or for adoption, if it has merit, it'll travel. And what amazed us, and this hadn't happened to this extent, this quickly for us, on any brand in P&G at that point, is we went global in about 18 hours, like penetrating deep. And there's no social media barriers. You don't need a passport or a visa, right? Yeah. The content finds its way to you if the content has the right algorithm behind it, and it did. I mean, you won't believe this, but we spent $100,000 and some on the entire media of the entire campaign to get to 100+ million views, because we didn't have to. The algorithm did it for us.
Yeah, the earned media value around this is huge, right? Well, and I wonder, so are you still getting death threats? Is there still, this was 2 years ago, the message still resonates, right? Are you still getting a reaction? Is it still, what's going on now?
Each passing year, the narrative gets more and more positive because there's so many other layers of creative that have come since then that have reinforced the message and have clarified the message. So I'm lucky and grateful that the family and I are safe. To be honest, even that moment when there were death threats, I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized subsequently that was still a significant minority. Mm-hmm. It's just a razor ad at the end of the day, right? But what has strengthened our resolve is that with each successive generation of the campaign, and now we're in the third year, the support we've received. We've done a version on racism in the UK. We've done a version on expression in France. We've done a version of living life to the fullest in Italy. And with each version that we've done, we've sort of received more and more positive feedback, more and more, the sentiment seems to be more and more positive. Especially when the coin drops for the viewer that, okay, this is not done to politicize an issue, it's done so that we can be better for our children. That's when it becomes a little bit easier for folks to say, okay, I understand the vantage point. I don't like the execution, but I understand and appreciate the message.
Interesting. And I know you talk about, brand equity, obviously, the earned media, all of that, but did it result in sales? I mean, did you see a blip in sales at all?
We have, and we continue to see that. I can only state what's available publicly, but the grooming business is, last quarter was an increase in 6% in sales publicly, globally, which is one of our best quarters in years. And in Europe, where I am, our share continues to be robust and our sales continue to be robust. So, and the equity amongst young men, Gen Z and millennials, which is such an important part of the future of our business, continues to be incredibly robust. So we definitely got what we were looking for out of the campaign, and we're glad we were able to bring that interception, that tipping point in the business. Otherwise, the worst thing you can be in our business, as you know better than I, is irrelevant. That's the worst thing, right? Indifference of the consumer is unacceptable. And I think we certainly are out of that. And now we're starting to see embracement. People have a feeling towards Gillette that's positive. And when you are able to combine love and respect, I think you're able to secure business for a long time. And we've reached that sweet spot now.
That's awesome. I mean, it's a highly competitive space. I mean, you said that yourself, you have a lot of people coming after your consumer. So that's impressive that you're able to still drive results. And you guys, and a brand that's so old, 30 years, since the last campaign.
Overall, 30 years since the campaign, you're right.
Yeah, since the campaign. Very cool. So, what's in the future? Where do you go from here? I know you've had other campaigns that have built on it. You talked a little bit about the campaigns in the UK and France, but, where do you go? I'm assuming the tagline remains and you'll continue to play off of it, but can you talk a little bit about the future for Gillette?
As long as I can influence the brand, it'll remain the best a man can get and the best man can be. Certainly that's here to stay. We're going to take the story forward, and probably the biggest thing I can tell you about the story going forward is a very clear declaration that no matter what you do on your face and body to groom yourself, we're going to find a solution that works for you, even if that means growing a beard. Now, we don't want everyone to have Duck Dynasty beards all the time, but we certainly want to make sure that whatever works for you, man, whatever works for you, there'll be a Gillette for that. So we've just launched a range for men who want to maintain their beard. First 110 years that the brand has done that. So it's called King C Gillette, and it's available across Europe and now in the US as well. And that sort of takes the story forward, right? It's the best a man can get, not the best a shave a man can get. So whether you shave or not, whether you're at home or at work, office work, there's a Gillette solution for you. So that's probably the next chapter.
Well, it's cool to have a beard these days, right? You got Movember and all that kind of stuff. So, and
if you groom it, our only request on behalf of your girlfriend, wife, and significant others and boyfriends, our only request is you groom it. That's the only request.
Yeah, just please groom. Exactly. Well, great. Well, I think I'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. If I don't see questions yet. I did want to ask you something, in your bio, while we wait to see if any Q&A come through. In your bio, you're a stand-up comedian. Can you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was interesting.
There is no good way this will end otherwise. There's no good answer to that question that doesn't embarrass me. I do this from time to time, and I must tell you I'm miserable at it. But that, for some reason, it doesn't stop me from trying. As long as you enter the location of choice after midnight, and there's sufficient amount of social lubrication in place, I think people think I'm doing comedy. But I don't think you'll judge that as comedy in the middle of the afternoon. But I'm trying to do my best. It's something we do just to do something else outside work.
That's so cool. That is really cool. I found that interesting in your bio. Well, I think you answered. Oh, wait, I got one coming through. I got a question. Were you going to say something before I share the question?
I think I was looking at the same thing you were looking at. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. All right. What's next for the best a man can be, especially in 2021? So maybe a little bit, not as far out, but any specific plans for 2021?
The plan is to take the best a man can get forward. We continue the Best Men Can Be Fund. If you are a not-for-profit organization that is in any way associated with anti-bullying, anti-harassment, progressive masculinity, reach out to us on gillette.com/US. And you can go to the Best a Man Can Give front and you can apply for it. We're also going to continue our work there are spaces we've outlined, how we influence men in communities, how we influence men in sports, how we talk to men in the world of business, of which this is a part. And we'll continue doing that. And on the product side, on the business side, on the portfolio side, it's exactly what I just told you, which is continue to serve a wider range of men and not fixate or box one look as the look. Rather tell you your look is the best look because that's the best that works for you. So that's the future.
Interesting. So this is a great question. And I know you talked a little bit about the always campaign like a girl, but the question here is, where do you see a future where grooming isn't so gender specific? Think pink and blue brands.
We do have a business for on the female side. It's called Venus. You may have heard the name. And the campaign that we run there is as inclusive. It's called My Skin, My Way. It's the same story forward. There is also a world to be explored, which is probably premature to speak now, but certainly on our vantage point, which is the world which is more gender agnostic. And that's something we're actively talking to consumers about. But we do have a female business that is operating in a very similar tone and vein. And if you go to Venus.com or you see any of our Venus ads, you will feel that a very inclusive, we call it skin-clusive versus the one definition. For years, we ran ads on, and we'll say this in all honesty to you, we ran ads with one white girl in a white bikini in a Caribbean island, one look. That was the Venus girl until it wasn't. Yeah. And now if you Google Venus, the last thing you'll see is just that one definition. Not that that's not the good definition, but that's not the only definition. So same tone on Gillette and Venus. They're brothers and sisters and they speak off the same, from the same parental voice.
I love that, the same parental voice. Well, I'm a Venus customer and I'm definitely not the white bikini girl, but love the product. Great. So another question here kind of plays on what we talked about a little bit earlier, but love this ad. Just curious, was the first comment from the leadership team at P&G after all the comment? What was the first comment? And then they said, example, Susan Cantor, chief of branding from Red Peak. Men are saying we feel marginalized, criticized, and accused rather than feeling inspired, empowered, and encouraged.
Yeah. So. The first thing that I heard from P&G was, how are you? How are you? How are you? How's the family? Is there anything I can do to help? How are you feeling?
Supportive.
That was the first thing. That was the first, and I always remembered it for the rest of my professional life. That was the first thought on the voice on the other end, who is a very senior leader in Procter & Gamble. And the second question was,
just to clarify that they're making, this is after the campaign ran. And
the campaign, no, the first night,
okay,
when it went live and we started getting a lot of hate that night. That was the first response. The second response was, let's quickly do a check whether what you're seeing on Reddit is reflective of America. And we quickly realized it wasn't. But it took a few hours before we knew the answer to that question. And when it was clear that it wasn't reflective and people largely liked this ad, particularly young people, then the thing was, how do we support you get this in front of more eyes? Yeah. That was the tonality and support of P&G. It was more courageous than most people think large corporations can be. But that's the nature and texture of the culture at P&G.
That's so cool. They had your back all the way through, regardless of, if it happened to actually be a risk that was a mistake.
And if it was if it was a mistake on my end, which I would take responsibility for, I would tell the world that and move forward. So absolutely, they were willing to support me.
It wasn't, that's awesome. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I loved learning about this, and I'm excited to see what more is to come from the brand. And especially, I find the interesting how you evolve with the gender and the evolution of the different brands that you represent. So with that, unless there's anything else you wanted to share, I think we can wrap it up.
Just express gratitude for giving me a chance to speak to you and tell the story. And thank you so much for doing this Q&A.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So nice to meet you, and enjoy Switzerland.
Thank you, I will. And thank you, Dan, for introducing me. The video played right after. I didn't get a chance to say hello, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for joining, and super inspiring and just exciting to see how a campaign develops over time and how it's changed the culture. And so thank you both for that conversation. We've got a bit of time before our next panel here. So I do have one question, Pankaj, which is, I'm curious to hear, as you thought about the creative changing, how did that affect your media strategy? And so when you thought about the way this campaign evolved over a couple of years and built on itself, did the accompanying media strategy change as well?
It did. It did. We originally were thinking of a 30-second commercial. You know, the original Gillette ad was designed for TV. This was in 1989, so 7,000 years ago. And it was designed for Super Bowl, right? And so when we started thinking about the launch of the 30th anniversary of the campaign, the initial thinking was it'll be a TV ad. Very quickly, we realized that the story is best suited for a digital format. And we also realized that we can talk a little bit about the work that we're going to do after the ad, because, you know, the ad ends with, we're starting to get better ourselves, join us, right? That's what the ad says at the end. And that would trigger a series of creatives about what we were doing. And actually, if you go to YouTube or you go to Gillette page, you will see all the stories of real men in the real world, in the US, on the East, West Coast, Midwest, everywhere in the country, who said, yeah, here's the one thing I'm doing to be better. And there's so many inspiring stories that followed. So when we realized that's where we're headed, it became clear that our media strategy had to change. And suddenly the ecosystem in which we were going to operate changed. Our budget throughput thinking changed. The impact that communications and PR would need to have changed. And so it was pretty massive difference between the starting point in 2018 and by the time we reached the new year in 2019. It was pretty impressive. And it's continued to change since then. You know, and then so many components of the digital ecosystem that have become more amplified or important because of this. And we are continue to still be surprised to this day how a campaign, a tone, an ad, a value vantage point influences purchase within 10 seconds. You know, gone are the days where you used to say, oh, your purpose advertising doesn't drive sales. Well, that's not what we see right now on Google. So I think that also has evolved, and I think it'll continue to evolve. I know you know more about that than I would, but I'm starting to see just on the receiving side how it's starting to evolve.
It's fascinating. So it sounds like it's become more participatory. It's become more cross-functional with communications and PR.
More user-generated, more on media, more user-generated. Starts with search, works because people want to know what this campaign is about, and then works its way from there.
Sounds good. We had two other questions that came in on the Q&A chat. The first was, how did you track your audience response to your ads, specifically toxic masculinity, mostly social, or were you looking elsewhere? And I'll maybe add a clarifier onto that, where you talked, Pankaj, about how you quickly looked at what you saw on Reddit and how did that line up with what the broader conversation looked like. So it sounds like the question is just, how do you actually, for something that's purpose-driven, get a good read on the culture?
First thing we did was we tested the ad with groups of audiences online before airing the ad, just to know what the reaction would be to the ad. And many frames were changed and adjusted because of that feedback, just so you know. So the edit you ended up seeing and the world ended up seeing was not the original edit because it evolved. It changed about 8 times before it got to where it got. Because someone said, I don't like that, and I don't think that's reflective of this behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So it got better. And I'm sure, Dan, I could find 100 people right now in the summit that could say, I would change those 2 things. I would change So I think if I would have done more research, I would have refined it even more. So that happened pre-testing online, sort of pre-market. And then after launch, Reddit was not our first choice. Reddit was just the fastest. There was a Reddit thread that someone had picked up, a Reddit user at 1 a.m. had watched this on YouTube organically. It hadn't switched to paid, and just happened to watch it, went nuts, absolutely nuts. 12 people on Reddit started talking about it, and it got bigger from there. We also realized that a particular thread that I don't want to mention its specific name, but a thread, a political thread picked up, and there were a lot of bots that got added to that. So Reddit was simply the first. Reddit wasn't our platform of post-market analysis. What we did do is we got hold of 7 or 8 companies. Morning Consult was one of them. Morning Consult was one of the few that gave us real-time data on the first day. But there were many others where we were constantly asking them, listen, what are you, show us representative, don't put quotas, don't put barriers. We want to get a big picture as much as possible, split us by age, split us by gender. And that came every day, the 10 days. And then we started moving to monthly. And that was multi-source, but mostly using virtual formats,
Interesting. So it sounds like it came from a bunch of different places. We've got 3 more audience questions before we close it out here. The next one is, what are some ideas that never made it to TV, but you think are great creative or ideas for the campaign that you have thought about?
Don't have to worry about it because you'll see it soon outside TV.
There you go. We'll have to stay tuned.
Just hang on to those words. They're coming to a mobile near you.
Awesome. Well, we will all have to stay tuned. The next question here.
Good idea. If it's a good idea, it's going to be seen by you. I promise you.
The next question is, what brands are doing a great job of purpose-driven marketing today?
One of the reference points we looked at as soon as the campaign went live was Nike. And Nike had just finished the Call-In campaign, which many of us in the US will remember. It had just happened a few months prior. And they had consistently shown to us the balance that can be driven when you are focused on your mission and your purpose. And I continue to be inspired by the work they do. That's a brand that sticks out. There's a gentleman who runs, a senior leader runs P&G, and we were in a situation room, and the one person said, "Is this Nike or is this Kendall Jenner's Pepsi?" A person in that room, because Kendall Jenner had done this Pepsi ad, which some of you will remember. And I remember distinctly looking at that person and saying, "It's Gillette." Because that's going to be, people are going to say, "Is this a Gillette?" for future examples. So, but if you ask us who's we inspired by, we probably think they do a good job. Nike does a good job.
That's amazing. And I think you guys absolutely set a precedent for a category unto itself. Our final question here, which I think is a great one. What advice would you give to young marketers who are just starting out their career in today's world?
This is the one I get a lot. And, the answer most people expect when they ask me this question is, make sure you demonstrate courage, take risks, don't worry about, speak your mind, make sure your voice is heard, stuff like that. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. Here's what I'm going to say if you're young and watching this. Please understand the science of the brand building exercise, or the media exercise, or the language of the world you're living in. Become fluent in that language. If you think you're fluent in that language, and if you can say that to yourself, you're not fluent in that language. Because anyone who's really fluent in the language will never admit to themselves that they're fluent in that language. Whatever that language will be. Whether it's OTT or it's online or it's conventional advertising like the one I shared with you. So my first request is try to get fluent. When you have reached a certain level of expertise or mastery in your fluidity, then experiment. And experiment with allies. Once you've done with that, then feel free to jump off the cliff and hope that the parachute opens. But that's stage 3. And normally in most conferences like this, that's the first advice. Jump off the cliff, see what happens. No, please invest in fluency. Learn it's a science. We call it an art, but it's a science. As well as an art, get good at it. Then take calculated risks with allies, then jump off the cliff. Feel free to jump off the cliff, no problem. Do that. If you're 21 now, let's think of doing that at 29. But there's still 8 years to go. So start learning that language. That's my humble request.
I think that's excellent advice to learn, to experiment, and then to go big. And so with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you again, Pankaj, for excellent advice and some storytelling and inspiration. And thank you, Davina, for moderating an excellent conversation.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.